Greetings fellow men, Servus Männer, it's Redfield Germany again, and today I want to make a little follow-up video on my last one about Assi Toni, or Chad Thundercock as he was called on MGTOW Central. Anyway, so it is kind of related to that, so I want to talk about why many long-term relationships and marriages actually fail in the end. And this is related to this Assi Toni guy from Offenbach who talks about fucking all these women with boyfriends or married women actually. But it is kind of the other side. So I want to ask what makes women go to guys like that who are in relationships, or why they are in relationships anyway when they go to a guy like that. And why many marriages and long-term relationships fail from lack of sex or frustration or something like that. What are possible avenues or a possible mechanism that leads to this unfortunate end? And a little warning, so it might not apply to you personally, it might not apply to large groups of people, but I think I came across over the years, I came across one avenue towards this end. I'm not saying it's for all cases relevant, or it's happening 80% of the cases. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is one possibly relevant mechanism, okay? So bear with me. So cases that we can exclude, that I'm not talking about in any way now, is the case of the classic gold digger, for example. Like if a woman just married a guy obviously for only his money. I'm not talking about these cases. I'm also not talking about very promiscuous people to begin with. I mean, if people are used to cheating and having multiple sexual partners, even though they're in a long-term relationship or even when they're married, I'm also not talking about these people. And I also don't want to talk about the case where one or both partners actually become really, really unattractive and then, they don't turn the other person on in bed anymore. This is also a clear case, another reason that is an explanation, and I also don't want to talk about that one now. So the people I'm talking about are quote-unquote decent people. I'm not saying they're good people, I'm not saying they're not people, I'm just saying that they come maybe from a conservative background, from a middle-class background, and they are maybe religious, or they have some sense of decency and morality, wherever that comes from, right? So those are the people, I want to talk about now. So what I have seen in many of my coworkers who got married way earlier than me, and many of my friends who also got married way earlier than me, is that even though they were kind of middle class, kind of centrist, conservative, so they were not the wild party people who did a lot of drugs and went to rave parties, they were these decent, normal people, right? And despite of all that, when they were young, they had a quite fulfilling, quite good sex life actually, from what I could tell, from what they told me, from what I could hear sometimes anyway. So they had regular sex and they had pretty good sex for both sides, I guess. So they probably met already in school or in early college, university, and so they married quote-unquote their high school sweetheart or something, right? This is how it often went. And then they understood each other as some kind of a team, and they worked together on projects. Like the house is a project, his new job is a project, moving to another town is a project, and then the children are of course the biggest project, and the education and the upbringing of the children. So they become partners who work in a project, and they see each other as a team. And then especially when children are there, they see each other as mommy and daddy. They think of the other person as the mother of my children or the father of my children and stuff like that. Which is not wrong, of course, but that is the dominant way in which they think about the other person then. And when you mix that now with this decency and this sense of morality, then you get into a situation where they want to be seen by their partner as someone who is almost a saint, almost like a nun or almost like a monk. And this is a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, of course, when the children come, then of course the woman's body changes, it undergoes changes. And yeah, I know that, and that is a sudden event, more or less. But still, I mean, the overall process is not only dependent on the children. It happens anyway. And this is a gradual process. So the relationship becomes more like a brother-sister relationship, or two best friends who happen to live together, for example. And then you don't want to be naughty with your best friend or with your sister or your brother. You don't want to share your passions or sexual desires in the bedroom with them in an open fashion like they did when they were still younger. So over the years, sex will become more boring and more standard and less naughty and less dirty. And we all know that good sex is dirty sex. I mean, at least that's what I think. But that doesn't mean that they don't want dirty sex or good sex, wild sex anymore. Both of them want that, of course, but they are just too scared to ask the other person, or to show that or demand that from the other person, or to lead into that direction. They don't do it, and they're scared. They want to maintain their decent reputation, so to speak, being the good mother, being the good husband. And that kills romance in the bedroom. And this is when some of the women, for example, might give Tony or Chad a little call on the way home, so that he can take care of them properly, right? So I noticed that in Japan a lot as well. They literally refer to the other person as otosan or okasan. That means like father or mother. Like 32-year-old married people call the other person father and mother, or mommy or daddy. I think that was quite weird. And how could you still have proper sex with someone that you call mommy? I mean, that's just twisted. And I think it goes a little deeper than that. Maybe women instinctively know that they hold power over a sexually frustrated man, and that if they would actually fulfill his sexual desires, and in the process maybe their own, then they would actually lose a lot of their power, and the man wouldn't jump through hoops anymore. I mean, in some cases, of course, both people could just be bored with each other, but I've seen many cases where they clearly weren't bored with each other, where they really just tried to appear as being a decent person who doesn't do dirty stuff like that. And they would, of course, do that with a stranger or someone they barely know. And then they will tell these strangers, "Oh, don't talk about this. Don't mention this to anyone. I'm so ashamed that I did that. Don't mention it," you know? And someone that they know, someone that knows their parents, for example, their husband, you know, and someone who's part of the family, they can't do that stuff with them because they think it's dirty. So to sum up, in many cases, I think these marriages fail because of sexual frustration. Not because these people don't have sexual desires, or not because they don't want to have good sex, because they are scared of having that good sex with someone that they hold dear so much. And as I said, this only applies in cases, I mean, this mechanism only applies in cases where they actually have feelings of love or friendship or towards the other person, right? If not, if they hate each other, then forget about this mechanism. Then it doesn't apply. Then they just hate each other, yeah? Or if one of them gets really fat, yeah, then you have the answer. That's because they got fat, right? But I really mean, well, there is basically nothing wrong with them, and they are basically both still attracted to each other, but it's a psychological thing, I guess. You know, it's this fear of losing that reputation of being a decent person, a good person, kind of. So this is just a little something I wanted to say after this last video about the bad boy who bangs the married women and the women in long-term relationships, and maybe this is one avenue that leads to such a scenario in which this happens. Okay, have a great day. Servus, Kameraden.